All right, Talk Tickers listeners, earnings season is in full swing, and, well, today we're going to be diving into the numbers behind AT&T's Q3 2024 earnings call. You've sent us your notes, the articles, the transcript, and let me tell you, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time for the telecom giant. They're in the middle of this major transformation, betting big on 5G and fiber, while also trying to manage, the decline of some of their older businesses.
Exactly. So to start things off, AT&T beat earnings estimates. The stock is up. But I guess the question is, what does that really tell us?
Well, yeah, on the surface, it's a good sign, a sign of strength, especially in a market that's kind of been described as normalizing, which just basically means that, growth is slowing down after a really intense period of activity.
Right. So how does AT&T stand out, in this current environment?
Well, one really important thing to look at is their postpaid phone subscriber growth. They added 403,000 new customers this quarter. Now, that may not sound like a huge number, but, when you consider the overall market dynamics, it's actually pretty impressive.
And their churn rate, right. That's the percentage of customers who leave every month. What do we see there?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Their churn rate is super low, only 0.8%. I mean, think about that. They're keeping almost all of their customers. That kind of loyalty, it really says a lot about their service and, overall customer satisfaction.
Okay, so they're keeping their current customers happy. They're adding new ones. But with the iPhone 15 launch and all hype around its AI features, could that shake things up?
That's the big question, right? John Stany, AT&T's CEO, actually talked about this during the earnings call. He thinks the impact of these new AI features will be more gradual. It won't be like a sudden boom, right? Like software evolves over time. It's not always about, sudden revolutions.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so let's switch gears a bit and talk about fiber. This is an area where AT&T is really making waves.
Oh, yeah. Fiber is definitely their star performer for sure. They added another 226,000 fiber subscribers just this quarter. And get this, they're aiming for 30 million fiber locations by the end of 2025.
That's a huge goal.
Yeah.
And they even hinted that they might expand even beyond that initial target. What's making them so confident?
Well, they keep mentioning these better than expected returns, from their fiber investments. It's clear that fiber is exceeding their, financial projections, which is, that's why they're doubling down.
So it's not just about building out the infrastructure. It's about the profitability of those connections.
Yeah. Exactly. And they're not just doing this alone either. AT&T is also forming all these strategic partnerships to expand their fiber reach. We're talking Gigapower, which is their joint venture with BlackRock. And they also have agreements with these open access fiber providers. Basically, they're tapping into existing networks to, speed up their growth, which is, it's a really smart move.
It's like they're building a fiber kingdom, but instead of conquering territory, they're working together, collaborating to reach more people faster. And that's pretty clever, right?
Absolutely. It's a really strategic way for them to, maximize their investment and reach a much wider customer base. But every kingdom has its challenges.
Right. And for AT&T, that seems to be their business wireline segment. What's going on there?
Well, so this is the part of the business that includes those old school landlines that businesses used to rely on.
So no one's rocking the rotary phone anymore. What kind of impact is that having on AT&T?
Well, their business wireline EBITDA, which basically measures profitability, is down. Those old landline services, they're really hurting their bottom line. It's a classic example of disruption, right?
Yeah.
As technology advances, those old ways of doing things, they just become obsolete.
Okay, so the question is this a sinking ship? Can AT&T turn things around in this segment?
Well, John Stany, he's always the optimist. He sees what he calls green shoots, emerging from their new, more connectivity-focused products. They're trying to, shift away from those old services and offer businesses these more modern, cloud-based solutions. It's like a modernization makeover for, the business world.
Interesting. So it sounds like they're trying to evolve with the times.
Yeah.
But is that going to be enough to offset that decline in landline revenue?
That's the big question, right? It remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
But they've said they'll share more details about their plans at their Analyst and Investor Day, which is happening in December 3rd, everybody. Mark your calendars. We'll definitely be keeping a close eye on that.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about mobile, fiber, and the struggles of business wireline. But there's this other big theme that AT&T is pushing, and that's convergence. So for those of us who, aren't telecom experts, can you break that down for us?
Sure, think of it this way. AT&T is basically betting that you, the consumer, want simplicity and convenience, right? So they're offering these bundled packages that include both mobile and internet services, and it's all from, one provider.
So one bill, one company, less hassle. Makes sense to me. Are they having any success with this strategy?
They are. They're seeing a higher wireless market share in areas where they also offer, AT&T fiber. It seems like bundling is a really powerful incentive for a lot of customers.
Yeah, it's like the two birds, one stone scenario, right? You get your internet and mobile needs met all at once. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a good bundle discount?
Exactly. Bundling can be a win-win for both, the company and the consumer. And speaking of wins, let's talk about AT&T's financial strategy.
All right, let's get into the money talk. Are they being, responsible with their capital allocation, paying down debt, investing wisely?
From what we can see, yeah, they seem to be doing all the right things. They're actively paying down debt. They're maintaining a strong investment strategy. And they even sold their remaining stake in DirecTV.
Wait, they sold DirecTV. Now that's interesting. What's the thinking behind that move?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? It's leading to a lot of speculation about, what they might do next. Some analysts think it could be a sign that they're shifting towards content aggregation or maybe forming partnerships with some of these streaming services.
So AT&T might be moving beyond just, providing the pipes and actually getting into the content game themselves. Now that's something worth watching.
It is. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Mobile momentum, fiber dominance, the the business wireline situation, this convergence play, and the whole DirecTV sale.
Yeah.
So where does AT&T stand as we look ahead to the rest of 2024 and beyond?
Well, they haven't given any specific financial guidance yet, but they have said that they're optimistic about continued growth in EBITDA and operating income in 2025.
So it sounds like they're feeling confident about their future prospects.
Yeah, it seems like that transformation that they've been going through these past few years, it's starting to pay off. But as with any big company, there are always going to be challenges and, uncertainties on the horizon.
Right. It's not always smooth sailing. So let's zoom out for a second. What does all of this mean for the telecom industry, as a whole?
Well, AT&T is like a bellwether for the industry. They're a leader, but they're operating in this really rapidly changing landscape. So the big questions are their bets on fiber and 5G going to pay off in the long run? And how will they handle this, this evolving competitive landscape?
And how will this whole DirecTV sale shape their future strategy?
Exactly. And, another thing to remember is the rise of these open access networks and partnerships. It's really blurring the lines in the telecom world. What used to be these, very clearly defined territories are becoming a lot more collaborative.
It's like the old rules of the game are being rewritten, and AT&T's right in the middle of it.
Exactly. And, that brings up a really interesting point that John Stany made during the call. He said that he didn't rule out the possibility of AT&T actually becoming a major open access fiber provider themselves.
Hold on. Are you saying that AT&T, the company that built this massive fiber network, might actually rent it out to their competitors?
It might sound counterintuitive, but, think about it from a business perspective. They've invested so much in this infrastructure, so if they can lease out, any unused capacity, that becomes another revenue stream for them.
And potentially a really lucrative one, considering, the growing demand for fiber.
Exactly. It's all about, adapting to this changing market. And speaking of adapting, let's go back to, their workforce. Do you remember that recent work stoppage they had in the Southeast?
Right. Yeah. The 1 month strike that affected their fiber installations. That sounded pretty tense.
It was. But they did manage to reach an agreement with the union, which included new contracts and, annual wage increases for the employees.
So it sounds like both sides were able to find some common ground.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that both AT&T and the union seem to agree that the company needs to, really focus on 5G and fiber. The workers understand that the future of their jobs really depends on the success of these new technologies.
It's a good reminder that behind all these financial numbers and, all the strategic decisions, there are real people whose livelihoods are tied to AT&T's success.
Absolutely. And it's also a reminder that a company's workforce is a valuable asset, especially in an industry that relies on, skilled technicians and engineers. speaking of skilled workforce, they actually highlighted the role of FirstNet during those recent hurricanes.
Oh, FirstNet, that's their dedicated network for first responders, right?
Exactly. And during Hurricane Helene, they handled over 200 emergency response requests. It was one of their, largest efforts ever.
Wow, that's incredible. It really shows you how important reliable communication is during those kinds of emergencies. You really see the value of a network that's specifically designed for public safety.
Absolutely. And the FCC actually just recently allocated more spectrum to FirstNet, specifically for 5G deployment. So that really underscores the importance of this network. They're building, a network for the future of public safety.
It's good to see AT&T investing in something that has, such a clear social benefit, along with, their focus on profitability. It shows a sense of responsibility, to the community.
I agree. It's a good reminder that a company's impact goes beyond, just its shareholders. They also have a responsibility to the communities they serve.
Well said. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Mobile, fiber, business wireline workforce, FirstNet. It feels like AT&T is, juggling a lot right now.
They are. It's a complex business with a lot of moving parts.
Well, yeah.
But it seems like their core strategy is really focused on a few key areas.
All right, so let's recap those key areas. What should investors really be watching for in the coming months and years?
Okay, so first, keep an eye on that fiber expansion. They've got some really ambitious goals, and those partnerships are going to be key to their success. And like we said, watch those better than expected returns. If they keep exceeding expectations, who knows how far they'll go with fiber.
And you're right. Who knows how far they'll go with fiber if those returns keep exceeding expectations.
Second, watch how they handle those challenges in business wireline. Can they really turn things around? Their Analyst Day in December should give us some more answers.
Fingers crossed for some good news there. And third, that convergence play. It's early days, but if they can, really lock in those customers with both mobile and internet, that's a huge advantage.
Definitely. And finally, keep an eye on their capital allocation strategy. They're in a strong position right now, so how will they use that for future growth? Acquisitions, new investments. There are a lot of possibilities, especially with that DirecTV sale shaking things up.
It's like they're holding all the cards, and we're just waiting to see how they play them. And yeah, the DirecTV sale definitely throws in a bit of a wild card.
Oh, for sure. Could they become a major player in, content aggregation, partner with those streaming services? The possibilities are really interesting.
All right, so listeners, if you're invested in AT&T or just interested in the future of telecom, buckle up. This ride's just getting started.
It definitely is. And remember, even with all this analysis, the future is never certain. There are always surprises and, unexpected turns.
Well, that's what makes it so exciting. Thanks for joining us on Talk Tickers for this, for this deep dive into AT&T. We'll be back soon with another earnings call breakdown. Until then, happy investing.
Yeah, it really does feel like things are changing,
Yeah.
For the whole industry and AT&T, with their size and history, they're really in a unique position to shape what comes next.
Okay, so you've got me thinking now. If they do become, this big open access fiber provider, what does that mean for their competitors?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that actually help out those smaller companies?
It's a really interesting situation, yeah. On the one hand, yeah, it could level the playing field a bit, give those smaller companies access to AT&T's massive network. But at the same time, it also puts AT&T in a kind of gatekeeper position, right? They control the infrastructure, so that gives them a lot of leverage.
So it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Right. They could actually encourage more competition while also strengthening their own, position in the market.
Exactly. And it's something that other big telecom companies are looking into as well. These lines between traditional competitors are becoming more and more blurred as these partnerships and these open access models, gain traction.
It's almost like that old saying, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
Except in this case, it's more like, if you can't beat them, rent them your network.
Yeah, exactly. And the shift towards more collaboration, it could actually be good for consumers too. More competition often leads to better pricing and more innovative services.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if those smaller companies can use AT&T's fiber network, then they can focus on, developing those new products and services instead of having to spend a ton of money building their own infrastructure.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a win-win for everybody involved, potentially.
Okay, so we've been talking about, the big picture, the future of the industry, but we should probably talk about, the human element here. You mentioned that worker strike earlier. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was a pretty significant event. It was a 1-month strike, and it really impacted AT&T's their fiber installations down in the Southeast. It was a reminder of how important their workforce is to their success.
Right, because without those technicians out there, actually doing the work, all those fiber plans are just, they're just plans.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's important to remember that these are skilled workers. A lot of them are unionized, and they're fighting for fair wages and benefits.
So what happened with the strike? Did they end up reaching some kind of agreement?
They did, yeah. Both AT&T and the union, they agreed on new contracts, which included, annual wage increases. It was a tough negotiation, but, in the end, both sides understood that they needed to find some common ground.
It sounds like a good example of, the power of collective bargaining
Mm.
and the importance of, valuing your workforce.
Absolutely. And this whole thing actually ties back into, AT&T's larger transformation. Both the company and the workers, they understand that the future of their jobs really depends on how successful these new technologies are, like 5G and fiber.
Yeah.
They're all in this together.
It's a good reminder that behind all the financial reports and those big strategic decisions, there are real people whose lives are affected by the decisions that these companies make.
That's a really good point. Speaking of, real world impact, let's talk about FirstNet. We touched on this a bit earlier, but I think it's worth, diving a little deeper.
Yeah, definitely. Tell us more about this dedicated network for first responders.
Mhm.
Sounds like a really crucial service, especially during those emergency situations.
It is. Absolutely. Imagine a hurricane, a wildfire, any situation where communication is absolutely essential. FirstNet gives priority access and, a dedicated bandwidth to first responders so they can communicate reliably, even when other networks are completely overloaded.
So it's like a lifeline for the people who are out there, saving lives.
Exactly. And during Hurricane Helene, FirstNet really showed its value. They handled over 200 emergency response requests. Coordinating rescues, supporting evacuations, just keeping those first responders connected.
Wow, that's amazing. You mentioned earlier that the FCC just allocated more spectrum to FirstNet for 5G. What kind of impact is that going to have?
That's a huge development. It
Yeah.
means that FirstNet is going to be able to use the speed and capacity of 5G, which is just going to make them even better at supporting those emergency response efforts.
So they're not just, maintaining the network, they're actually improving it and getting ready for the future.
Exactly. They're building a network for the future of public safety. And that's a really powerful story.
It is, and it's also it's a smart move for AT&T business-wise.
Mm.
By investing in FirstNet, they're not only, helping to meet this vital need, but they're also securing, a long-term source of revenue from government contracts.
Absolutely. It's a perfect example of how a company can, do good while also doing well.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how transformative technology can be, especially in those critical situations.
Okay, so we've talked about the future of the industry, the importance of their workforce, and the impact of FirstNet. It feels like AT&T is, they're operating on a lot of different levels, right? They're tackling these big challenges,
Yeah.
but they're also staying focused on, on their core business.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And as we look ahead to the next few years, I think it's going to be really, really fascinating to see how they manage all of these different priorities.
Right, because they're really a company in transition. They're changing their business model, adopting these new technologies, and facing pressure from both competitors and investors. It's a lot to handle.
It is, definitely. But I think one thing's for sure, AT&T is not just sitting around. They're making big moves, taking risks, and and positioning themselves for the future.
Okay, so let's talk about those big moves, in more detail.
Yeah.
What are some specific strategies that investors should be watching as AT&T goes through this transformation?
Well, yeah, first and foremost, definitely keep an eye on that fiber rollout. They're going for some pretty aggressive targets. And the success of those partnerships, that's really going to be key. And, like we said, if those better than expected returns keep exceeding expectations, well, who knows how far they'll go with it.
Yeah, you're right. It's like they found this winning formula with fiber, and they're just going to keep running with it. But what about that other big issue we talked about, business wireline? I mean, is there any real chance they can turn that around?
I think that's the big unknown right now. We'll get a lot more insight at their Analyst and Investor Day in December. We'll be listening for any concrete plans, any real signs that they have a solid strategy for a turnaround.
Right, December 3rd. Everyone listening, mark your calendars.
Yeah.
We'll be breaking it all down for you. But in the meantime, I'm curious about this convergence strategy. Does it really have the potential to be, a game changer?
It could be, yeah. If they can really lock in customers with both, mobile and internet services, it creates this kind of ecosystem that's really hard to leave. It's all about giving people, the most convenient and valuable experience.
Makes sense. And we can't forget about the financial side of things. What's the deal with their capital allocation strategy right now?
They're in a really good spot financially. They're paying down debt. They're investing strategically. And now with the DirecTV sale, they've got even more capital available. So the question is, how are they going to use it, right? Acquisitions, new investments. There are a ton of options.
So it's like they've got all the pieces in place, but we're still waiting to see how the game's going to play out.
Yeah.
And that DirecTV sale, I mean, that really adds a new wrinkle to the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. And, we can't forget about that comment from John Stany about possibility of AT&T becoming, a major player in the open access fiber space. I mean, that would be a huge shift, not just for AT&T, but for the whole industry.
Yeah, that's a bold move.
Yeah.
If it works, it could solidify their position as, the leader in fiber.
Which is also a risky move, right? I mean, they'd be opening up their infrastructure to, to their competitors.
It's a high risk, high reward kind of play for sure. But it looks like AT&T is willing to take that gamble. They're betting on the future, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So I guess the bottom line is AT&T's kind of at a crossroads right now, huh? They're getting rid of old businesses, investing in new ones, and trying to navigate this ever-changing landscape.
Yeah, exactly. They're in the middle of a major transformation. And the choices they make over the next few years, I mean, they're going to have a big impact on the entire industry.
Well, Talk Tickers listeners, if you're following AT&T or just interested in, what's happening in telecom in general, you're not going to want to miss a thing. This is just the beginning.
Oh, yeah. It's a story of, transformation, disruption, innovation. We'll be here to analyze it every step of the way.
All right, everyone, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into AT&T's Q3 earnings call. We'll be back soon with more insights and analysis from the world of earnings. Until then, happy investing.